We are talking today about the 13 common mistakes that novice real estate investors make. Now, I have personally made 12 of those 13 mistakes and paid a heavy price for each of them. I would rather that you learn from my mistakes and avoid doing them yourself so you don't have to pay the price that I did. Now, the 13th mistake I did not make. And so I'm going to share that. That's the very last one. So let's get right into this. The first mistake is rushing to buy. I know that a lot of novice real estate investors are reluctant to buy, but here's the thing, rushing to buy can be a big problem. It was for me. 20 years ago, I left the US Navy and I declared myself to be a full time real estate investor, but I had never owned a property. And so I went to these auctions and I looked online at properties and I still was scared. And I had $125,000 of cash saved up. And so finally, I just went to this auction in Philadelphia, 100 miles away from where I lived, and I just bid on a 5 unit apartment building sight unseen. It turned out that I ended up buying this thing in inner city Philadelphia. Four of the five tenants refused to pay any money. One of the tenants murdered another one of the tenants a few weeks later. It was a mess. The building was in disrepair. I did not understand what I was doing. I couldn't find a property manager who would handle it. It just was a mistake because the money was burning a hole in my pocket and I thought, well, I need to do something now. Now, what I should have done instead of buying this 5 unit apartment building 100 miles away in an inner city area, sight unseen, I should have bought something closer to home that was a two, three, or four family property. Now, I ended up doing that about 6 weeks later. I bought a fixer upper duplex about 35 miles away. I moved into one unit and I fixed up the other one and then rented it out. I fixed up the unit that I was in. Then after 3 years, I rented that out. So and then I kept that property for a total of 17 years fully rented. It was a good little deal. I ended up selling it to buy another rental property. So what can you do? Consider buying a two, three, or four family property. Get a loan where you're an owner occupant, live in one unit for at least a year, rent the others, get experience, and then you can move out, keep the property, and go buy the next one. A common mistake that many novice investors make is not performing sufficient due diligence on the property. Some investors don't do a home inspection. If you're a novice, you really should. Also, you should get contractor estimates for any renovation work that you're going to do. And you want to do this before you buy the property, not afterwards. So you don't blow your budget because the amount of work is far greater than what you planned for. Now, also, this can happen to people buying commercial properties. I made a huge mistake over a decade ago. I bought a commercial property with owner financing, and I thought it was pretty smart. And what I failed to do is this: is that first off, the first floor unit was a 10,000 square foot uh, place for a anchor tenant, and I thought I could split it up into lots of little rental units. And I found out that I needed to do architecturally approved drawings and get 2 hour fire rated drywall and substantial renovations done before I could do anything like that. Also, I thought I could just simply build an apartment in the vacant space on the second floor, and I needed to have, again, architecturally approved drawings and a fire escape and a number of other things. And on top of that, the zoning officer for the area lived on the same block. And the moment I tried to start work with some contractors, he shut it down. I ended up taking a massive loss on that building. So you want to do due diligence up front, work with your realtor to have an inspection contingency period. Get a proper home inspection of your property. Also, if it's a commercial property or if it's a residential property where you're making big changes, make sure you examine what approvals you will need well before you close the property. Another mistake that novice investors tend to make is overpaying for the property they end up buying. They offer too much money, they don't negotiate during the inspection period. They don't negotiate during any other contingency periods, and they just don't know what they're getting into, and they end up paying way too much. There's a saying in real estate that the money is made on the buy. You want to buy it as cheap as possible. You know what some people do is that they may live in a city where an apartment costs $1 million, and then they go a couple hours outside the city to the suburbs and they see a property that's selling for $200,000 and they think it's cheap. But just because it's relatively cheap compared to what you're paying for a home in the city does not make it an inexpensive property. You've got to know your comparable sales. You've got to know the after repair value. You've got to know the cost of renovating the property. Another mistake that many new investors make is asking friends and family for money or partnering with friends and family when they really didn't need to do so. If you get excited about a property, that's great. That doesn't mean that you have to bring your friends and family along for the ride. And you don't necessarily have to borrow money from them because there are so many sources of money. There are a lot of things that can go wrong on a deal, and you don't want to have a very uncomfortable Thanksgiving dinner with your friends or family. Also, a lot of people don't have confidence up front, and what they want to do to try to make up for their lack of confidence is bring on a bunch of partners, their buddies, their family members. And you don't necessarily need to bring on partners just because you're feeling a little lonely or lacking confidence. You only want to bring on partners if they're going to substantially add value to the deal. You're typically better off doing the deal yourself, finding the money through other sources like a bank or a mortgage loan originator or a hard money lender or a private lender who's not related to you, who's not your buddy. You could also go and basically do the deal yourself. And instead of having business partners in the deal, hire a coach, consult with your attorney, your accountant, and a mentor. The fifth mistake that many new investors make is that they don't factor in all the costs associated with the deal. They know what the purchase price is, but they don't necessarily factor in the closing costs, the agent commissions, perhaps property management fees, renovation costs, carrying costs like utilities, homeowners association fees, insurance costs. You need to know your costs up front, and they are actually very predictable if you do your research. So make sure that you know all the hard and soft costs before you get into the deal. The sixth mistake that many novice investors make is over improving the property. I know I've done that. If you're going to rent a house out, you don't need to improve it as if you were going to live there. I made that mistake on my first rental property. I did things like buy solid wood doors for all the rooms instead of hollow core doors. I spent money on premium paints. I bought high end light fixtures and sinks and things of that nature. I completely overspent on the property, whereas I probably could have gotten away with a $40,000 renovation. I instead spent over $100,000 on it. Now, if you're a house flipper, you probably do want to improve the property above and beyond what a landlord might do. However, you don't have to over improve it either. You've got to establish a budget up front and stick to the budget. It By doing that, you are forcing yourself to be a great business person and to be disciplined in your purchases. So make sure you have a budget and stick to it. Another common mistake is hiring a bad contractor, and worse, sticking with him way too long after you realize that he's not the right fit for you or your project. Now, I've made these mistakes before. One mistake is I didn't get competing bids. I just accepted the first person who came in with an estimate. And also, I've made another mistake where I paid 50% or more upfront to start work, and I didn't have enough leverage on the contractor to complete the job the way that I wanted in the time frame that I wanted. Now, what you can do to reduce your risk is get multiple bids, solicit your friends and family to see who can refer a great contractor, talk with the contractor's past customers to get a feel for the experience that you're about to have if you hire them. Another thing you can do is make sure that your initial payment is less than 50%. And something else you can do is just first hire the contractor for a smaller job to see how they work with you and how they work on the property. And then consider them for a bigger portion of the job if they've proven themselves on the smaller job. Now, if the contractor is not completing the job, or they're taking way too long, or they've just vanished with your money, well, you've got some avenues that you should take. One is consult your legal counsel. Another is report them to the Better Business Bureau. Another is demand your money back or demand that they come and complete the work. In some cases, you're going to have to just take a loss and bring in another contractor to finish the job that the first one failed to do. Another common mistake that investors make is taking too long to renovate their property. Whether you're a landlord or a house flipper, time is money. If you're a landlord, every day that the house sits vacant is lost revenue forever. So you want to Improve the property as quickly as possible and get it rented. If you're a house flipper, there's a concept known as the velocity of money. So let's say you were really slow and it took you a whole year to renovate a property. Well, imagine this. What if you had gotten the property renovated and sold in 6 months and then bought another property and renovated it and sold it in 6 months? You would have used the same money to sell two properties, make two profits, I would hope. If you can turn it around in 3 months, imagine this. You could potentially do four deals in a year with the same money. You increase the velocity of your money as a flipper when you can move quickly. Another typical mistake of new investors is overpricing the property. If you're a landlord, you want to be able to ask for the market rents, not overprice it and have your property sit vacant for months on end. You lose all that money. If you're a house flipper, and I've seen many flippers do this, when they're all done, they get greedy and they ask for a price that is way above market value. Listen, whether you're a landlord or a flipper, it's pretty easy to determine if you're overpriced. If the property is sitting vacant and there's insufficient activity from renters or buyers after a couple of weeks, you know you're overpriced. You can also find out from a property manager or from a realtor if you're overpriced just by asking for their informed opinion. So make sure you price it right. Don't be greedy. A common problem for some investors is running out of money on the project. Some investors don't create a budget at all, and others create a budget but don't stick with it. First off, if a contractor says that the job is going to be $25,000, what you should do mentally is add 20% to that number. So that's another $5,000 for a total of $30,000 because there's going to be unforeseen expenses, some punch list items, and other things that pop up. And you need to have that extra money to complete the job to your satisfaction. Also, as I mentioned, you got to have a budget and you got to stick with it. Don't underestimate the renovation costs and don't overpay and over improve the property. Make sure that you have enough money to finish the project, even if there are some unforeseen expenses. The 11th common problem is not having the right people on your team. People are just not the right fit, not in alignment with your goals and standards. One way this is manifested is through having a business partner who just doesn't mesh with you. Now, you may think, hey, I'll have a 50-50 business partner. I'll give up half the profit. They'll do half the work. It'll all be great. But if you don't have the right business partner, not only will they take half your profit, they may cost you 100% of your investment. I knew one house flipper who wanted to bring his friend into the deal. And his friend said, great, you do the work and I'll be the guy who supplies half the money. Well, this partner was always many weeks late with supplying money when they needed to pay the contractor. So the first partner was doing all the work and providing all the funding and dealing with all the stress. It turned out that that flip project lost money. Another way this can be manifested is through your advisors who are not getting back to you. I knew a real estate investor who had an attorney and had lots of legal questions that were urgent, but the lawyer just would not call him back. Listen, if your lawyer is not going to call you back, you need to fire that lawyer and set a standard with the next one that you expect prompt responses to your questions. You want to have the right people on your team. A third way this can play out is if you're not in alignment with your spouse. I've seen some married couples undergo great stress in a project. Sometimes they would have been better off doing a smaller project, or perhaps choosing to be landlords instead of house flippers, or vice versa. Listen, first off, if you're married, need to have your spouse in complete alignment with you on the scope of the project. Listen, if he or she is not open to the risk involved or things like that, maybe you shouldn't do the project at all and instead invest in a REIT, real estate investment trust. The 12th common mistake is paying too much for the money that you borrow. Now, I get it. If there's huge profit potential on a deal that you're looking at, maybe the relatively high interest rate and points and fees don't matter as much because you're going to make a lot of money. And especially if you're a house flipper and you only intend to own the property for a few months, I encourage you, however, to be resourceful. Look for many sources of funding. Let's say that, for example, that you've come across a hard money lender who's going to charge 3 points and also $3,000 in fees. What if there's another hard money lender who will charge less? Or what if there's a private money lender who will charge the same amount in interest but won't charge any points or fees. Please shop around. Go to several banks. Go to several mortgage brokers. Go for the loans that have the lowest interest rate and the fewest points and fees. Make sure there's no prepayment penalties. I want you to pay less for your money. The last mistake is one I haven't made. It's giving up too soon. You're going to have challenges. You're going to make mistakes. Don't give up. Keep moving forward. I made colossal mistakes over and over again, but I kept moving forward. Today, I'm blessed to be a multimillionaire, and my passive income is exceeds my lifestyle expenses. I want you to have the same level of success or more. Thank you for watching this video. Again, I'm Ty Desa. I want you to succeed in real estate. Subscribe to my YouTube page. Go to my website, investandtransform.com. That's investandtransform.com. We got tons of free information for you. I want you to succeed greatly in real estate.